Well, without further ado, I'll hand it over to Feather, and she's going to talk about building adaptive, not necessarily responsive, but adaptive apps with Ember. So, thank you, Feather. Give her a round of applause, please.
Hi. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right. So thanks for sticking around for my talk. I know it's getting late. If any of you need to leave for whatever reason, I won't be offended. Just the back doors over there. And just
Except an alarm goes off. Check us out.
whatever. For whatever reason you need to leave, the guy who's blocking the door will actually unblock the door for you. All right. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about an Ember app that I've been working on for the past year and a half or so. And so first of all, you're probably wondering, who the hell am I? Might be the first time you've ever heard of me. First of all, as you can see from the photo, I really love puns. I came to Netflix about 2 years ago. I'm still the only Feather there. Yes, it is my real name. And yes, my last name is also a common noun. I did not pick either one of those names for myself. I'm rocking them, so yeah. So I've been a lot of things. I was also a working artist, and I've been a teacher at a web development bootcamp before coming to Netflix. I also was a very early adoptee of the internet, and I started in 1995. I wrote my first terrible home web page. So yeah, it probably had like blinking things and purple background. So I'm currently working on an internal application for marketing, and I've been working on Ember for about a year. So, so the application that I'm working on is called VanDAM. Has nothing to do with an actual dam. It's a digital asset management system. So basically what that means is that it's a repository for images that our marketing department uses to do all of their promotion of, mostly of Netflix originals. So it actually replaced a bunch of kind of really clunky pieces of software. They had sort of a workflow that involved like several spreadsheets and a couple of pieces of software that didn't really do everything they wanted. And so we're kind of trying to create something that makes a comprehensive solution for marketing. And we started out pretty unambitiously. So the history of VanDAM, this is Jean-Claude Van Damme as a young child. Kind of an awkward start. So we did too. We were kind of a bunch of, you know, like just kind of lost people trying to build an app. Our first app was really pretty, it was a demo that sort of became an app. And it was a Rails, mostly a Rails single page app with some jQuery embedded in it. And I remember actually when I first came into this project, looking at the source code and kind of just screaming silently like, oh my God, really? There's like JavaScript embedded in HTML, and it was just, yeah, it was a mess. Our app could go down for deploys. It was, it would be crickets. Today, it's not like that at all. So yeah, VanDAM has turned things around for himself, and also our app is different. We have a Rails API. We're using Elasticsearch to make our searches more efficient. We have an Ember CLI app on the front end. And thanks, Stefan. And hopefully I'm saying your name right. So it's what it was before, a repo for assets, but it's all these other things as well. So it's really becoming this comprehensive solution more and more, and it just keeps expanding. So right now we're at 5 full-time engineers, 2 product managers, 2 designers. We cannot have downtime. If we're down for a second, we hear about it. It's really, it's kind of become a completely different environment. It started out as very much just an internal application. So we were kind of the opinion that if you weren't using Chrome, then we really didn't want to hear from you. And we could do that because it was just internal, right? But now we have more and more people using VanDAM. It's more and more important. So they wrote some books about us. One was about staying in sync, written by the German Coast Guard. what are you thinking about? Anyway, so we had to, in addition to supporting browsers other than just Chrome, we had to start thinking about taking parts of our application and making them more mobile friendly. Part of the reason is that we actually have a lot of Netflix talent using our tool to look at their photos, because every time there's a shooting of a Netflix original, there are a ton of photos being taken. And so, certain people want to go in there and just look at their photos, and they don't want to go on their computer, and they're really like fancy, famous people, so they want to use a phone. And you're not going to just say to them, no, don't use your phone, right? Yeah, so we needed to kind of make part of our app more friendly. So at this point, I will demo our app a little bit. So if you guys are seeing. Oh. Is that a little better? Can you guys see that? Can you kind of?
Yeah, that's
okay,
fine.
I know it's.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot going on here, so this is sort of. This is one of the views that I would see if I created a folder full of assets. None of these are actual Netflix assets, by the way. I wasn't really sure kind of like what I could actually show you guys. So these are all just, you might have seen The Princess Bride. It's one of the all-time best movies out there. If you disagree, then we can't be friends. I'm sorry.
As you wish.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
As you wish, he said.
Anyway, yeah, there's more. So this is a view that you can take mobile. That library can be seen, and this is what you would see basically if you were on a mobile phone. And gosh, it's really tiny. I can make this a little bigger. There we go. So this is a simulator. This is kind of iPhone 6 size. So you can see that the grid of images is kind of sized down to fit nicely in there. And then you have this pagination that kind of looks nice in a mobile setting. And then you have the image kind of just takes up the screen. And all of the data that you would have seen in the side page of the image now shows up in this little overlay. So it's, right now, this isn't, oh, and then this is a place where we put all the search. So if you want to find the one that's in Flemish, that happens to be Skeptical Dog. I don't know why, he just speaks Flemish, it's his thing. So anyway, that's sort of an abbreviated overview of VanDAM. Does a lot more than that, but I'm not going to go into that right now. It's late and people want to get out of here someday. So yeah, Eric kind of touched on this difference between an adaptive website versus a responsive website. And sort of my first exposure to building a responsive website was taking my own personal website for my art and making it mobile friendly. I used to do a lot of art festivals, kind of outdoor art festivals, and people would be walking around looking at different artists. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if they could be looking at my website while they're walking around? So you can see here just a little thumbnail of sort of what my website looks like on a phone. So that site, I kind of designed it like a coffee table book. It's just basically the same content that you'd see in the full site. The mobile site looks exactly it's the same stuff. It's just organized slightly differently. So there's no real change in content. Whereas an app like VanDAM has a lot more complexity. It's basically every time you log into VanDAM, it's going to show you content that depends on who you are. You're going to see different kinds of assets. You're going to see different buttons. You'll be able to do different things. You'll have different things show up depending on how important you think they are. So it's kind of, I think of it as like a Hogwarts book. You know, it's like one of those books that kind of knows who you are and comes to life, depending on how you see it. I know. Harry Potter, in case nobody knows that. So a responsive site, you can use things like CSS and just hide things. And actually, this is pretty efficient. If you do display equals none or visibility hidden in your CSS, then those elements will be removed from the DOM. And if those elements are removed from the DOM, most screens will just ignore them. So you'll get a huge efficiency gain just from hiding stuff. You might have to change a little bit of JavaScript just to, add or remove classes depending on what site you're in. So like in my website, with those little boxes, I needed something that would actually recognize that you were on a touch screen so that those boxes would allow you to open the menu. So an adaptive site is going to show you different content depending on what type of device you're using. And so with VanDAM, we actually, you'll see different content depending on if you're on a mobile phone or if you're on a tablet or if you're on a desktop. And then so it actually will kind of hide a lot of content and a lot of functionality. And we really needed to do that because we have a ton of computed properties in VanDAM. We don't have a lot of observers, thanks to Eric, who told us early on, do not use observers. I mean, you can, but do so at your own risk. So basically, if we just don't have those observers in our templates, then we just save a huge amount of computational power right there. So we set it up so that we just hide a lot of stuff. Actually, we just don't render at all. So one approach for making a mobile app in Ember is just to have separate templates. And another thing that you really want to think about is your CSS. And I know that a lot of developers really hate CSS and don't want to think about CSS. So there's a couple of things that are really sort of good things to bear in mind. Use class selectors, not universal selectors. Just try to scope your CSS as much as possible so that you're, for us, we're using a pod structure, so each component has its own CSS, and the CSS is just already scoped in there. So that it's just kind of like a huge win. And I think sort of that's a good direction to go in. I think it's going to probably end up being less like that, even more so. So another thing is Flexbox. How many of you are using a Flexbox? I'm just curious. Oh, that's awesome. Oh my God. OK, so yeah. Flexbox is it's really great for anything mobile. It just helps your elements slide around and fill space as needed. So another thing you can do is make components for mobile specifically. So when I first started using Flexbox, I was a teacher doing a web development bootcamp. And this was one of the assignments that we gave our students. Because it's really fun to just make students write silly apps. And so this is basically just an app that would give you a form to submit. And I thought it would be really fun to try to take a round div. It's basically just like border radius equals 50%, that. And then circle, inside of that circle, have another div perfectly centered. And it's really hard to do that in CSS. But that was the first time I ever used Flexbox. So anyway, this is the magic 8-ball app of my dreams. This is actually still alive, by the way. You guys can go up there and actually ask it a question. And I think Zach did that one day. I love it because every once in a while I'll just check in on it and see who's been using it. And there was just this hilarious conversation, and it turned out that Zach and Ryan had been playing with it. Anyway, so I hope all of you will go in there and ask it really weird questions. The answers are always going to be the same, but I mean, it's more the question that's interesting. So anyway, that was a wild digression. So the way that we ended up working with our mobile component of our Ember app was probably a little bit naive, now that I think about it. I mean, kind of in retrospect. But it worked really well for sort of what we were doing. I'll probably end up refactoring it going forward. We, like I said, can't have any downtime. There's been a lot of talk at EmberConf. A lot of people were talking about taking huge applications and moving them to mobile. We actually, or to Ember. We actually did kind of go through a little bit of that too with VanDAM. And I think it's similar when you take a big app that hasn't been mobile and you try to make it mobile. You have to just you go piece by piece. We can't at this point do huge disruptive changes. It just isn't functional for us. So we started with just the public share views, and eventually we'll be able to do a lot more stuff. So basically our functionality in mobile is just really pared down. We have the same templates for desktop and mobile, but we've put in some variables that determine what gets rendered in each situation. We created specific components for mobile. So there's certain widgets that you see in mobile that work out better. So that kind of that data overlay that I was showing you guys that goes up and shows you all the metadata about an asset, that is a specifically mobile component. So you guys might have seen this word occlude. How many of you knew already what the word occlude meant? Oh my God, 3 of you. Awesome. So I remember first seeing this word in a talk by Chris Thoburn, or actually, I don't really know how to pronounce his last name. Runspired. Okay.
I didn't know the origin, though. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm kind of a word nerd. So I heard the word occlude, and I was like, Latin? Nobody told me there was going to be Latin. And so, yeah, it's mostly something that I've heard in medical terminology, usually having to do with arteries, and it sounds kind of like really serious. But basically, when you talk about occluding content, it means just preventing it from rendering. I don't think that's actually like the second definition. I think it's probably like the third or the fourth, or I don't know. Considering it's been around since the 16th century, I think it's probably the 5th definition. Anyway, so occluding content, how do you do that? And there's a couple different ways you can do that. The way that we did it is that we used Ember Screen, which is an Ember add-on, and we used that to listen for different screen sizes and also different types of devices. And so we created these variables for breakpoints and also for device type. Every time that there was a component that needed to be treated differently, I would just inject that screen variable into my component, and then I could use it in my templates. So, oh God, that's really tiny. Can you guys see that? Oh, that's right. I'm looking at that one. It's tiny. You guys can see it, right?
Kind of.
All right. So yeah, it's pretty simple. I had to add these variables, is mobile and is tablet, because the screen mixin really just looks for, the screen service really just looks for screen size. It doesn't actually detect what type of device you're using, but that was easy enough to change. So yeah, this is kind of the process for occluding. And as you can see, this actually eventually is going to start to look pretty messy. So if you have a bunch of these if-else statements and you've already got really huge templates like we do, it can really start to look kind of like a pile of spaghetti again. We also have these mobile components. And the mobile components worked out really well the way that we were doing it. You could just pass data down to the mobile component, or just pass it on to the regular component. But with Flexi, you don't actually need to do a lot of that stuff. You can set up your breakpoints in your configuration. And then you just have separate layouts for mobile and for whatever other types of, maybe you have a tablet view. it's actually really cool. It's kind of like, so do any of you remember tables? Like back in the old day, when you'd write tables, you'd have, table header, and you'd, have like table other stuff, and then table row. And it was kind of a pain, right, to do this. But in a lot of ways, it made sense. You could actually just say in sort of very simple language, like, I want some stuff that's going to go this way, and then I want some other stuff that's going to go this way, and I want to put some elements in, in this relationship to each other, and it would sort of resize. And so Flexi actually gives you these really cool components that you can use that look like HTML. Basically, they are HTML, and you can you use it in a declarative way, similar to the way that you would write a table. Except, this is the cool part, you can actually write in stuff like remember in Bootstrap grids you'd have like extra small column. You can actually write that type of positioning logic directly into your component. So it's actually a really nice, clean way of positioning elements on the page. And so basically there's just kind of this built-in grid system in Flexi. And the thing I like about this as an artist especially is that positioning just takes up so much of your brain when you're thinking about CSS or design. And I love the idea that you can just kind of forget about positioning and focus on the part that's really fun, like color and style and making things look pretty or visually interesting or useful. So yeah, I think that going forward, I would probably, and we're actually in the process of making a new project, I would use Flexi.
What is Flexi?
It's another Ember add-on. Yeah.
Layout system.
So yeah, it's actually, this is next project. Questions on the right slide. But actually on the end here, I have a list of links, and there is a link to Flexi in there. And all of my slides are going to be up on SlideShare, so all these links are just accessible, including the most important one of all. That's right. But we'll go back to questions. Oh yeah, and these are all the tools that I used. These are kind of just, if you're just looking like I was for just kind of a way to get started in mobile, I think these are a really good departure point. I would recommend Flexi as a more comprehensive solution. And then these are all the links to things that I think are really helpful and maybe even useful. Questions?
I have a question.
Okay.
Have you solved the boot startup problem on mobile?
The
Ember startup problem.
Ember desktop problem.
Startup.
The Ember startup problem. Oh, okay. All right, so you're talking about, I'm not sure.
How long it starts? When you open an application and how long?
Oh, okay. So are you talking about, have I personally solved this problem?
Yeah.
How long does VanDAM take to start up in a mobile phone?
It doesn't take long at all, actually.
How long?
It's pretty zippy.
He's got an iPhone.
Not long.
Android.
I mean, it probably depends on your type of phone. After, after we, yeah, I actually have an iPhone.
Can you go get coffee?
Pardon me?
Can you go get coffee and come back and it's still rendering, or not?
No. No, I mean, it's really fast. It's basically right there. So. Yeah. No, I mean, it's really like right there. It sounds like you want me to take it. If you want it to take longer.
Going to buy a new phone.
I mean, you could just go get some coffee if you really want coffee. Yes.
Did you have to ask Jean-Claude to use his name? And
You're in entertainment business.
I personally asked him. No, I didn't. No, it's actually not even spelled the same. So, yeah. So we decided this in a very scientific manner, and it's really funny because when I say scientific, I mean completely not scientific at all. So originally, when I started on VanDAM, it was called A10, It's because our fearless leader liked Egyptian gods. So yeah, Aten is like a sun god. And then at one point there was a forum that went around and said, what do you think would be the best new name for VanDAM? And it had to have like some kind of reference to what it was. So yeah, that was the name that won. Yeah.
How many Ember apps do you have apart from VanDAM?
Me personally or our team?
Netflix, I meant.
Oh, at Netflix? Oh,
Yeah.
there are a lot. Actually, it's funny. People don't even realize how many Netflix people do Ember.
I think there's at least 10 that I know of personally.
Yeah.
But there's probably more.
I mean, just on my team of 8, there's 2 right now. So there's this one, and then there's a new one. Yeah.
Have you ever thought about like an approach on server side where you configure like what kind of template that you want to return back to the client, depending on what is the OS of the client? For example, like if you open an app on mobile, so you don't want to load a ton of features that's only available for desktop. So you have thought about like config that on the back end and return only that the client needs.
Yeah, we're not actually doing that because that's part of the reason that we took a lot of those computed properties out of the templates. For us, that was enough of a performance gain for what we were trying to do. I know a lot of people do that, actually, because I talked around to a lot of different people at EmberConf, kind of what their approach was to mobile. And there are definitely a lot of people who are doing that. And I think it just depends on you and what your app does and what your needs are. But there are definitely some people who do that. They like right at the URL level. So they just handle that request, and right when the request is coming from a mobile device, they send it off to a mobile version of their app. So that's not what we're doing, but because we didn't really need to. So yeah.
Yeah, I had a question about your Breakpoint service that you were showing earlier. Does that recompute all those values when you say like resize a browser or like rotate a phone?
Oh, so no, it doesn't actually, and that's one of the differences too between Ember Screen and Flexi. So no. So Flexi will maintain the component, so it doesn't do any recomputation. So you can resize the screen and it will keep all of your variables intact. Ember Screen doesn't maintain anything between screen resize. So.
Okay, so it's more like you'll compute those values the first time you load the page, and then you kind of like build your layouts based on those original values.
Yeah, basically.
I do think like there's a service that's watching window resize in one place, so that you don't have to watch the resize events everywhere. You just watch it one place, one event listener, and then those conditionals will change based on
Auto batches because of that. So
yes.
You don't have like the wave of resizes that.
Yeah, it's a unified resize listener basically. So everything will react all at once instead of.
Thanks.
Yeah.
What if the user wants to use the desktop version of the site on their phone? Are there any issues with that?
So actually. No, most of the site will, if they're logged in and they want to see the desktop version, they'll see the desktop version. There are just a couple parts of the site that are mobile friendly right now, and so they'll be redirected to those parts of the app if they're browsing those parts. But the other parts that they want to do in mobile, I mean, they can go look at it, and it's not formatted well. But actually, most of it works. It just doesn't look very good. So. Yeah.
So you're talking about tons of data and lots of images.
Yeah.
Could you talk something about the data optimizations that you have done on the Ember data layer or any caching modules?
Yeah, we've done a lot of so I mean, it sort of depends on, do you mean like our data caching layer and kind of what we've done to?
So Ember data provides caching to some extent. So have you done any optimizations on top of that, or do you use the?
I think most of our optimizations in that respect have been in the back end. So, but there might be some of that in our front end as well. I'm actually not totally sure.
Can you tell me about circular divs? I thought that was very interesting. Just one of the slides meant for the 8-ball was like,
oh, are we going back to the 8-ball?
Circular div, yeah. No, that sounds like a really interesting new thing.
Actually, well, I mean, it's the same thing.
She goes to the occlude slide.
It's the same thing with this. this information button is a circular div.
Is that actually a thing?
Yeah.
Okay, that's totally new to me.
It's
Yeah,
a
this is-
border radius.
Border radius.
Yeah, so it's
Oh.
kind of a formula. Yeah.
Oh, with border radius. Okay, that makes sense.
So it's totally obvious. Just like centering something is margin zero auto, right? CSS, this thing of Stockholm syndrome.
Anybody else? All right, I've successfully worn you guys out. Okay, thanks everybody.
All right.